Hi, Teresa.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well.
Hi, Sarah.
Good evening.
Good evening. Do we know how many fellows are on this one tonight? I'm going to go into the LMS and see if I can find out. So it's telling me there are 11 people signed up. Now, I was on Sunday and there was supposed to be 35. There was 15. I was on last night. There were supposed to be 35. There were 22. So if my experience tells me anything, there will be fewer than 11. And then there'll be us. I see Nancy's here from Arizona. And it looks like Denise from Montana. Zamiko, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. And then Shauna. Hi, Stacy. Anna, are you on? Anna, are you on? Can you hear me?
Hi, everybody. Hope you're all having a good evening. I am just stepping in for a second to make sure that our facilitator is not having trouble logging in. Hope everybody's having a good evening. And we will get started here in just a minute. As we get going, if everyone could make sure that you are named with your first name, last name, and your state, that would be great. You can do that by going to the participants button, and then you just hover over your name and or maybe click on your name, and there's a rename option there. So first name, last name, and state would be awesome. And you can jump into the group chat and say hello if you would like to do that for just a moment while we get going.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm Linda Davin. I work at the National Education Association in the Teacher Quality Department, and I'm part of the TLI team that provides support to the state affiliates. Currently, I work with Columbus, Ohio, Massachusetts Teachers Association, and with Colorado Education Association. Even if we start a little bit late, Anna, we always end on time, don't we?
We sure do. And actually, Karen Albano is our facilitator tonight, and she is having some trouble logging in. So she is getting going. So I'm going to actually close my door really quick. I have a family thing happening in the living room. And then I'll get back and get us started on some introductions. So I'll be right back.
While Anna is gone, I'm not sure who's taking care of Sarah, Louise, who's taking care of attendance tonight or putting the attendance form log in.
This is Teresa. I'm actually in charge of that.
Oh,
do you want me to do it now, or do we want to wait?
Sure. Why don't you do it now? And that will give you a chance. Thank you, Teresa. I didn't realize you were doing it tonight.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, Karen, I reached out to her and she sent it to me. So
Great.
if you're not familiar, participants, fellows, in the chat screen, I'll be putting a link in there. So I'll just put that in there right now and just go ahead and click on it and you can submit your attendance.
When you click on that, you'll just have a short form to fill out. And at the bottom, it'll say submit. Make sure you click on that submit form. This indicates that you were present tonight and we're here for the conversation.
I'm also just taking some notes on just a scratch pad on my computer, just making sure that everybody is, that, you know, as I see people, I'm just typing them in just in case.
And if there's anything you're having difficulty with, whether it's getting into the chat box or getting into the participant area, don't hesitate to just unmute yourself and let us know.
And thanks so much for everybody going in and changing your name, first name, last name, state. Really appreciate that. It's helpful. We have quite a few folks on the call, so I don't think we're going to go through all the introductions, but I did want to invite our coaches to go ahead and introduce themselves. Tell us just a little bit about who you are, where you are, what you do.
I'm Sarah Piper. I'm in Missoula, Montana, and it's awesome to see so many Missoula people on. I guess this must be our good night to be on for Montana. Apparently it's Tuesday nights. I am, this is my first year coaching with the program, and I'm really excited for it. So looking forward to our call tonight.
Thanks, Sarah. Teresa?
Just unmuted myself. I'm Teresa Marchant. I'm from beautiful Billings, Montana, where it's 50 degrees today. So I'm so excited because last week we were below zero. I am part of the Lockwood Education Association. I am the union president there. And this is my first year being a coach for TLI. So I am super excited to be helping everyone. And I was in your shoes last year, so I know what it feels like.
Thank you so much. And I think we have one more coach on.
Hi, my name is Louise. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. My name is Louise Smith, and I am from Mississippi. And this is also my coach. I am a band director here, and I am one of the board members for the Mississippi Association. And I also did TLI. I was part of group 2. So many years ago, about 5 years ago now, it seems like, I was a graduate of the TLI process, and I'm so looking forward to working with y'all this year.
That's so great. Thank you so much. I think that Karen is here. Karen, are you here?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Hello.
Hi, everybody. Sorry for the delay. Thank you so much, Anna, for getting us going for a minute there. The alternative login process for the host is a little funky, so I am logged in as all of you are, which is kind of fun and interesting for this particular role. So I'm glad that you all, it sounds like, had an opportunity to kind of get to know one another a little bit. Has attendance been taken in our chat box? Yes.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So we're ready to go ahead and share our slide deck.
Yep. Actually, I didn't invite Linda to introduce herself, although I think she might have said a few words. Linda, was there anything else you wanted to say?
No, I'm just delighted to be here. I was able to be part of the virtual workshops on Sunday night and on Monday night, and I'm delighted to be with this group tonight. It's a little bit later, so I'm hopeful I'll be wide awake. And it's great to see Karen, who is a former alum, and I've worked with Karen in Massachusetts before, so it's great to see you, Karen.
Fantastic. All right, thanks. So yeah, Karen, I think you can take it away with the slide deck.
Awesome. Okay, so let me go ahead and shift this over, and then I can share with all of you. And then We'll go into present mode. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody, for a minute. As I click in here. All right, Anna, look good on your end?
Yep, looks good.
All right, perfect. So we're ready to get going. Everybody else can see? Can you give me a thumbs up if everybody looks good on their end? Anna's got me. Okay, awesome. Sometimes that's the easiest way for us to communicate. So as you can see, we're moving into Term 1, Module 2. This year is a little bit different than what we've had in the past. I can only speak to the 2 years that I did it, but in previous years, there was that Module 1 taking place in a little bit of a different setup. And so you didn't necessarily have time to meet with your group of fellows. So this year, did everybody get a chance to meet with their fellows? Give me another thumbs up if you've met in a face-to-face, right? I think at this point, Anna, everybody probably already has, which is fantastic and kind of, I think, sort of sets us up to have a more robust conversation because you've had that chance to meet with everyone and get a feel for what the program is about. Let's see. So this slide is a little bit different, right, Anna, because we already did some of those attendance things. Everybody was able to link through and make sure that you were logged in and got attendance, and so that's monitored. And then I know you had an opportunity to sort of share who you are and where you're from. And so there's some other norms that I think are worth mentioning here. Starting and ending on time. Starting on time was clearly not a success story completely this evening. But thank you to Anna for making sure that everybody kind of got in and up and running. And so I definitely appreciate that. It looks like you're all muted, which is fantastic. There'll be plenty of opportunities for you to share, but it kind of helps the flow of conversation and the background noise and all of that if our mics are turned off when other people are sharing. Lots of times you kind of get static, and I know I have a little guy in my own house. Thankfully, this is late on the East Coast, so he's in bed, but it kind of helps with all those background noises. Keeping your camera turned on during the meeting is nice. It adds to that kind of intimate feel that we're all working together and that we're learning with each other. And while we're working remotely, I think it's really nice for us to actually see each other. In fact, I kind of keep clicking up and down so I can actually see all of you. And then I get a feel for, what you're taking in and what you're getting out of what we're discussing. If you need to step away, feel free though to turn it off as well. You can just go up and mark yourself as stop video if you need to step out. Some kind of basic things about helping us stay engaged. Anna, you didn't go through all this already, right? Am I being totally redundant here, or did you go through this?
No, we didn't really do any of that. We just got going with introductions, really. So I think you're fine with the norms. You can probably jump to the next slide if you'd like. Okay,
perfect. So it sounds like we have an idea about that. So we're all set here. Okay, so we're going to do this kind of little quick warm up to kind of discuss creativity and innovation. And so why don't you take a minute or so to sort of read through this quote, and then we'll have kind of a brief conversation about what you think about it. And you can go ahead and share in the chat box if something interesting comes to mind, or we can certainly talk about it with one another as well. So I'll give you a couple moments to do that. Oopsies, sorry, we went back. Sorry about that. There you go. You're gonna need to see it. That makes it easier. All right, so you probably all had a minute to read through that, and I'll read it out loud, and then if people want to share in the chat box or volunteer, that'd be great. So it reads, the old idea that creative people were individually creative, and that it was individual ideas that were most impactful is making way for a new form of creativity. Now it's the ideas that emerge from networks that are most innovative. We as creative people have to understand how to participate in networks and how to create them. And so I know we've got our chat box going, so if any of the coaches want to keep an eye on that, that would be great. And then also, so feel free to type there if you like, or if anybody would like to kind of share out as well, that would be fantastic. What does that make you think of, and how is this sort of related to what we're doing as teachers and certainly here at TLI? And feel free to just unmute and chime in if you like. Any of my coaches want to share something first? I can certainly offer some feedback. What do we think about when we're talking about building a network? And that's really kind of what TLI is. Any thoughts on that?
I see this as something being like very much where they thought it was individually created, that two heads are better than one. And the only way that we're going to truly grow is to be around people who have different ideas than us. And then that sparks our creativity because we're able to push forward and, you know, move forward and to create something new because we are collaborating with other people and in our networks.
In the chat box, Zamiko from Mississippi just shared that it helps to communicate your ideas with others and build off each other to be even more creative, which I would 100% agree with, that there's so much more creativity to be had when you can bounce your ideas off other people than just sitting around trying to think it through on my own. I always get better outcomes when I work with other people on things.
Hi, Lisa from Phoenix. I would add in there that when you're working in a group, you tend to build on each other's ideas. So a small idea that you might have on your own can become something greater when it's built on by other members of a group.
Thank you all for sharing that. You know, I think those are really powerful comments about, you know, not only this as a program, but certainly how I think we're all kind of hoping we function as teachers, as teacher leaders. You know, how do we work together? Some of our most creative ideas come when we brainstorm with each other, when we collaborate with each other, as opposed to kind of working in our own silos. I think we get so much out of our experiences that take place when we're being innovative in more of a group setting. And so hopefully you're going to find that this experience contributes to your abilities as a teacher leader, not only independently, but with the other people that are working in the program, and even those that aren't. When you go back to your school setting, whatever your context may be, hopefully you see that these same skills that you're building here about collaboration and networking are beneficial there too. Was there anything else, coaches, that we wanted to add on that one, or you think we're ready to move on? All right. So we're going to share real quickly some of the objectives from this particular module, which is design. We're on module 2. I don't want to read through all of the components here, but I want to make sure we highlight some of the main pieces. You might have gotten into some of these at your face-to-face sessions, but you're probably kind of getting the vibe that this functions, you know, sort of similar to what you might see in a college syllabus, for example. In fact, that was something new that we got, I think, last year, right, Linda? We started with a syllabus, which was a little different than when I was a fellow. It's pretty exciting to see that there's sort of that structure to the learning that takes place here. So one of the most important things that you're going to work on is going to be conducting a needs assessment on a pathway related issue. So hopefully those terms are starting to become familiar with instruction, association, or policy, and what pathway you feel most closely aligned to in terms of what you may want to work on for your capstone. Like I said, I don't know if we necessarily need to read through these pieces. I think they're probably becoming more familiar. Coaches, do we think that's probably the case? And we can move on to the specifics for the virtual workshop objectives, unless anyone has any questions about these. If there's anything in that box. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. So let's talk about some of these virtual workshop objectives. These I do want to go a little more in depth with. We're hoping we can develop skills that'll be applied when working on our capstone projects. So much of what you're going to do, and I really learned this as a coach last year, was it's a building experience. So throughout all of these different modules, you're really gaining the types of skills that are going to allow you to successfully complete your capstone. And in the meantime, you're collecting a ton of evidence and other materials that you can use along the way. So you should definitely see this as a building process. You're going to explore how design thinking processes may be used to develop contextual assessments of needs and design plans for improvement, and deepen understanding of the ways in which bias may factor into personal leadership journeys. So those sound like some really big ideas, but I don't know if any of the coaches who've been through this process maybe want to speak to how this looked for them, either if they were a fellow or as a coach. What does this look like, kind of this building of knowledge?
Well, I can speak to that. I went through this a couple years ago as a TLI fellow, and I think the needs assessment was really the first time that I sat down and consciously thought about what my school and my district needed and what my colleagues needed, beyond just what I sort of felt like they needed. So it was a really great chance to actually have professional conversations with my superintendent, with my principal, with some of the school board members, and get their perspective on things, which made my plan much deeper than what I think it would have been if I had just kind of, in my own little bubble of vacuum, or whatever you want to think of it as, tried to come up with a solution.
Sarah, this is Linda. Can you remind me what your capstone was focused on, what that challenge was you decided to move on last year? I think I remember, but I want you to confirm.
Yeah, so it was actually, I was in the 2018 cohort. So my capstone was focused around building my local association. So I took on a leadership role within that. We hosted a bunch of different meeting types to try to get people more engaged. We looked at different ways that communication could be improved so that people, again, felt like they had more of a say in their union and that it was more relevant to their lives. And a lot of the solutions we came up with, I would never have thought of on my own when I was just looking at, from my perspective, what was, what felt like the necessary steps to take. It was really after I started looking at the broader picture that we were able to start making some progress. So I think needs assessments are awesome for so many reasons. But I thought it was a really great way to kick off the entire TLI experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because that question came up last night, sort of what is the needs assessment? What does it really do? And you really explained it well. When you're thinking about needs assessment, when you're thinking about your challenge or what it might be, it's sort of, you look at the problem or the issue or the challenge as to what exists right now, what this issue looks like right now, and how it could look better. And that gap between what it looks like now and what it could actually be is where your needs are, and where the needs assessment, and where you begin to think about how could I improve this. So thanks, that was really helpful.
I think it changes the focus also on the deficit model and moving it over to the strengths model by looking at where you're going as opposed to focusing on the barriers to get there. And I think that video, excuse me, that video really highlighted that group's effectiveness of holding each other accountable to not focus on the lack that they had.
Thanks everybody for that. I think from my personal opinion and experience, last year, I felt like the needs assessment could be challenging to kind of unpack and understand. And so I'm really grateful that there's some of those experiences that people had when they were using it to really hone in on what it is that you're trying to get at when you conduct a needs assessment. And that was a really powerful statement, I think, about, moving away from that deficit perspective and the assumption that this is how it is and this is how it will always be, and really taking into account that while there are challenges or needs here, how do we move forward and address them in an effective and strategic way? And so much of the work that you do within TLI is going to really help you finely tune those skills, so you can notice areas of need, conduct these needs assessments, and then engage in problem-solving strategies to make the types of changes that you see are necessary.
I'm looking forward to that opportunity for learning, because I found much of the work for change within local organizations and even on the state level come from a deficit model. So it would be really nice to get enough information and some practice through this TLI, being a fellow, that I can help steer my organization in a more positive direction, or assist to steer.
Well, this is Teresa from Montana. I think not only a change, I mean, you're working on a capstone, but the change you're going to see is also a change in yourself and how you see things, and maybe even the leadership style that you thought you had, and working with a group and realizing you're not the one that has all the say. As a group, you're working on this project, whatever that may be for your capstone, because you need to have the help of other people to come along this journey with you. And it's getting those people kind of engaged in this process and this thinking of how are we moving forward.
Thank you for sharing that. It's funny you mentioned that. It's almost like you're conducting a needs assessment within yourself, kind of finding those areas that we all have that we might want to work on, or areas that we might want to grow in. And that can be tough sometimes. I think we're going to notice that going through this process, it can be challenging, even when we get into some of the portions of the later part of this evening and we talk about some of the areas that I know last year were difficult with diversity and bias, and some of those things that you learn about yourself and how you're hoping to move forward and address them. That's what's really powerful here. I'm sure a lot of us have heard the ongoing buzz for conversations about growth mindset and fixed mindsets. And so you're going to start to see a lot of those kind of basic beliefs are going to hold true in the conversations that you have, both in terms of your project and in terms of your own personal growth. So thank you for mentioning that as well. I think that was a great point. All right, so real quick agenda of things that we're going to go over, reflect on some of the design thinking pre-work that was expected to be completed, discuss how design thinking processes might support the development of assessments and leadership plans, reflect on results and experiences from the implicit bias tests, and discuss the ways in which bias may factor into personal leadership and how to consciously address the issue. And that was part of what we were kind of just getting into is, how are we going to needs assess the, our context and the work that we're doing, but how are we also going to, in some ways, kind of needs assess ourselves? So that's going to be central to our conversations tonight. So when we're talking about this sort of 3-phase model of needs assessment, this graphic here is intended to illustrate the kind of 3 phases that we want to address when we're looking at that. And, the first phase is going to be to explore what is. The second phase is to gather and analyze data. And the third phase is to make decisions. If one of the coaches even wants to share the link, if they can, in the chat box, or if the participants won't be able to click through on their end, but if you're able to share it in the chat box, they'll be able to access it there. And so we're going to unpack this a little bit and see what these 3 different phases of conducting a needs assessment are, and hopefully that'll illustrate a little bit more clearly how to conduct it. All right. So the first part of this needs assessment starts with what is. And so when we think of those words, it'd be great to get some feedback. What do we think of when we consider what is? What does that mean? It's 2 pretty simple words, but if we could have some participants or coaches share out what we think about in terms of that language, what do you think it means?
I think I got distracted by clicking the link and I jumped to this comprehensive needs assessment. So sorry, I wasn't paying good attention to that question.
That's okay.
Am I supposed to touch the link?
You can if you like. It's a more kind of robust explanation of the needs assessment that we're talking about here. And if it makes sense, you can even think about this in terms of what is, and in some other ways, what isn't, if that helps people kind of share out what they're thinking, what is and what isn't, or even if we want to give an example of a what is or a what isn't, or a what isn't scenario, that would be great.
Just from reading that brief summary, I think a good way to summarize it would be it's instead of going at a project like hitting a nail with a hammer until you get it right, it's actually looking beforehand and deciding what you need to effectively get the job done rather than going through the trial and error. And then it reminds me that's actually a developmental milestone for approaches to learning to preschool kids. Does a child have to try every possible solution to solve a problem? So it's going past that problem solving process, going to what the objective is in the future that you want to reach, and then backtracking to figure out what you need to get there.
Great, that was excellent. So can we dive down a little bit deeper into this? So what would be, so if any of us look at, the context we work in, so let's say it's the school that you work in, what is a need that you see, or an area of your school that might be worth mentioning? What's its current state? What does it look like right now? Somebody shared in too, I see one in the chat box here. Might be like making an observation of the scenario first and identifying issues and problems that may need to be solved. Yeah, what exists now? So can anybody think of something in their school building that currently exists that they think might not be what it needs to be or is worth being addressed? And it can be as simple as, I think of my own school building, and this is really simple, but every day at the end of the day, we have a car line, and we have 100 kids in car line, and there's 2 lines of cars picking up all these kiddos, and it is like relatively organized in terms of safety, but it's pretty chaotic keeping 100 students quiet for 15 minutes at the elementary age level before they get picked up. So the what is I have 100 kiddos at the elementary age level that I need to keep quiet. That's my what is. It's what exists right now. It's not necessarily the greatest. It might lead us to our next area, which is, identifying some major concerns. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. Can anybody think of something in their school that currently is an issue, or something that is currently going on that they've noticed that might be worth mentioning?
Sure. In my school district, we have classrooms that are designed for very high needs special education students. And in these classrooms, I'm a special needs student. I have a teacher, I have high needs students. we have instructional assistants that help the program run smoothly to ensure safety with students and staff and to make sure that students' needs are being met. And we have, well, here's a need. There's budget deficits, and so when we have an instructional assistant that's absent, we do not get coverage for that person, which causes, obviously can cause some issues within the classroom, which also affect students having their needs met on a daily basis or safety of staff and students. So that's a pretty big issue. And I lost my chat, by the way. When I click this link, I can't find it again. It's gone. And I don't even have a back button to try to go get to it. So that's kind of interesting.
It might be on your toolbar on the bottom.
There's
If you're
no toolbar on the
sometimes
bottom.
if you bring your cursor down, it kind of magically appears.
Yeah.
It sort of fades in.
It kind of hasn't magically appeared anywhere since I did that. Oh, there's a picture of me. That's really weird. Sorry.
Oh no.
In the chat box, I'm seeing a lot of very similar things that I think resonate with a lot of us, that communication and teachers feeling like that they have a network and mentorship and the support they need, and then also students feeling like they have programs that engage them. So I think that that might resonate with many people in here. I know for me it certainly does, of things that, you know, are chronic problems. I think communication is something we all struggle with in districts.
Thank you for sharing. I look, there's tons of examples in the chat box, which is great. I provided a really simple example of something I see as a need, but some of these are pretty significant. I mean, these are things that really have a strong impact on the culture of your building, the safety of your students, the safety of staff, the building, you know, the ability of teachers to do their job effectively, for students to access instruction. So those are definitely great examples of what is. I think kind of in part of this conversation, we've sort of identified some of the major concerns. So if you really, so the example, if I'm making sure I understand this correctly, right, there's a special needs classroom where certain positions are not filled in, absences, and then you have students who are not getting the appropriate amount of support. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so, you know, the major concerns there are the ones that you identified. Kids are not safe. Teachers are not able to have a structure to their day. They probably have a loss of routine. And so those are pretty significant concerns, ones that can really have a strong impact on teachers and students, and most likely the administration as well.
Mm-hmm.
Determine some need indicators. So finding how these concerns, like how do you know that these needs exist? So when you look at that situation, it's probably pretty obvious. That sounds like a pretty, a situation where the example of the need is clear. You know, if you literally don't have staff to support kiddos, it's pretty simple to kind of identify the fact that they're not getting what they need. And then consider a data source. So how could you potentially, if we're taking the same situation, how could you look at this special ed classroom and use a data source that you might have in order to see the extent of this problem? What do you think you could look at maybe as a data source to see what's going on specifically?
Behavior logs.
Excellent. I think that's a great idea.
Complaints from parents for the typically developing peers that are included in the classroom.
Yeah.
Lots of data sources. Requesting observations and having input from observations from other professionals in the district.
Excellent. Even something as simple as looking, you know, some attendance logs, you know, when were people there? When were they not there? How often is it happening? How regular is it? It's great to dig down deeper into those data sources, because it gives you a lot of power in a way, I think, because sometimes things can seem like a bigger problem or a smaller problem. than they actually are. But when you look at the data, I think sometimes you're either surprised in good or bad ways about what's going on. And I think it gives you a lot of room to have conversations in ways that are less informal and more, this is a significant problem. This is why we're noticing our behavior data is really impacted by the lack of, teachers providing support in this classroom on these days. This is what it looks like when we don't have what we need there. So those are great examples. I think those are really excellent data sources. So thanks for sharing them.
I'm seeing something really interesting from Imogen. She was talking about her school is tracking how many minutes. Would she be willing to explain more about that? Because that sent my little red flag up of like, what is that about? So will she be willing, Imogen, would you be willing to explain more about that?
So right now, our SPED program doesn't have enough support for the amount of students that we have. So we've been promising a certain amount of minutes that we currently are not able to meet. So they've been trying to prove this so that we could kind of push our admin to get more SPED support staff. So we're currently tracking how many minutes we're supposed to meet and how many we're actually capable of meeting right now. Does that clear it up?
It does. So y'all are creating your own data as you're going through this.
Right.
Okay.
In an effort to try to get more support staff.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for providing that clarity. I really appreciate it. And it looks like we have a pretty robust chat conversation going, which is awesome. So coaches, if you notice anything that you think we should add into the mix, please feel free to do that. So let's talk about this shopping cart video graphic here. Am I correct in assuming that most of you have watched the video? Is that
Yes.
thumbs up? Awesome. I will say the video had quite an impact on fellows that I had last year in my group. I actually had one fellow reach out and ask if I could send the link to the video because she wanted to use it with another presentation that she did. That was pretty exciting. But let's kind of quickly digest this sort of imagery that we see here in terms of these kind of two different routes that you can take in terms of this design model. We have one that's divergence and one that's convergence. Does anybody want to share, or even one of the coaches, what we think about how this works and kind of what it looks like in practice and how it might look in your own district in terms of how things get done? Are people converging? Are they diverging? Which works better? Some of those kind of questions I think are coming to mind as I look at it.
Well, I think as, maybe from a union perspective, being in charge of negotiations, as you sit in a group, you have a lot of ideas. And so you're brainstorming and you have some great choices to think about. But then as a group, you kind of make that decision together and you come together, even though there's lots of possibilities out here. What is the final decision that you're making? And so we do our negotiations a little differently. It's more of a collaborative as a whole group with our administration, with our teachers, with our school board. We sit together and we come to a consensus of how we're moving forward and making changes in the contract. So you have lots of ideas, but you've got to come together.
Great.
Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, that was great. And I think it can be kind of a challenging graphic to digest, I think. It sounds, at least from what you've shared, Teresa, like you probably have a relatively healthy communication system going on. It sounds like that model is functioning pretty well. I think in theory, when we brainstorm ideas, when we look at, needs and then try to work on solutions, it's great for there to be a large number kind of avenues or solutions and the creation of choices taking place. And then, Teresa, I think you're right. It's probably natural that at some point, you have to circle back around, explore the choices that you've developed, and then come to a realization of which ones make sense. And obviously there's going to be certain political bodies or administrative bodies that probably make the majority of the choices. But hopefully if you're in a healthy system, there's enough collaboration, particularly on this creation of choices part, and at least a decent amount on the making choices part, where various stakeholders, which hopefully is a word we're all kind of getting used to, stakeholders are involved. Does anybody think of, when they think of stakeholders in their district, who would be included under that designation? Who do we think are stakeholders in terms of helping make choices? Can anybody think of some in their district that are worth mentioning? And you can even put them in the chat box if you like as well. Who is part of this conversation? Who should be when decisions are made in a school or in a district? Who do we want to make sure that are included?
I think that it should definitely be parents as well as students, teachers, admin, all the people that are involved in the day-to-day life of kids.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. All of the people that are included in the day-to-day life. That is a very wide range, but I think that's appropriate. I think it needs to be wide. I think sometimes we keep that stakeholders can, if we keep that term too tight, you miss out on all these other people. So I'm looking through some of the really great examples: parents, legislators, board members, outside agencies. I'm really glad we mentioned that one. Students, it's really important, I think, that they're included on that list of stakeholders, people that might be in a position to need to have some say in things that, choices that are made, parents, administrators. So these are great examples. Everyone who is involved with the kids, including the kids. So as you're thinking about, your capstone, as you're thinking about this needs assessment that you're conducting, I think it's really important to make sure that you're thinking about who are the people that are impacted throughout this process, and I think it's appropriate in a lot of cases to keep it wide. You might need to define who your stakeholders are in a little bit of a different way than someone else, but someone's saying they love that definition. I agree. Thanks, Heather. That's great. Those are really excellent ways to kind of summarize really anyone that's working with them, including them themselves. All right, let's move on to our next one. So again, this is just kind of that flow chart. What's currently in existence. We need to gather information to better understand what's going on, what the needs are, and then the decision-making process. And do we allow that decision-making process to be open-ended, where people are allowed to contribute to potential ideas, and then choices, and who's allowed to make those choices? And so that might look a little bit different. You might have a situation where in your district that's a really healthy process, like we talked about, and some other districts might be kind of less healthy in terms of how they collaborate. And Linda, you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes we don't invite all stakeholders to the discussion. Sometimes we forget certain groups. Linda, I don't know if you want to chime in, but I know I have my personal feelings about this. What do we think happens? Has anybody seen when certain stakeholders are not included and are left out of the conversation in the decision-making process? Has anybody had that happen with a decision that's been made? Go ahead and feel free to share, unmute and share if you'd like to tell us, what that looked like.
Well, for me, I know when I was a local leader, if we didn't invite the stakeholders, and it's a diverse group, and sometimes it's people like media, sometimes it's Chamber of Commerce. It's people who have influence in the community who can really help you move the needle on a particular idea. And if they're not invited, they sometimes become your opposition. And because of their influence in the community, that can be a strong opposition. So, and even if they are in opposition at the beginning, sometimes you can find somebody, an influencer, somebody you know or are close to, that can help persuade that person, and you can bring them along. Never shut the door. There are always opportunities.
Yeah, I would chime in. Even beyond involving the community and things, Teresa brought up negotiations, and anytime somebody feels like their voice isn't being heard, is a prime opportunity that suddenly they're going to have some issues with the results of a negotiation process. And so making sure that people have the chance to feel heard, even though it might not turn out the way that they want to, has been a real challenge that I've had to work on a lot over the years.
And it's funny because you can find out who the influences are. When I was bargaining chair, I found out very quickly one of the most influential parent groups were the band parents. They had enormous influence in the community. And were extremely helpful because I had some of their kids in class. But it was amazing how influential they were, because they also know people in the Chamber of Commerce. They knew policymakers because they were fundraisers as well. So sometimes you just have to figure out who those people are and connect those dots. That's why power mapping is important.
Those band people, we just got a lot of them. So we just have big groups.
So true.
That one time at band camp.
Yeah, I'm a flute player. Got it.
Along those lines too, I think finding the people who really their voice needs to be heard, because they are very influential, like the band parents, Louise, shout out. But then the ones that are the squeaky wheel, that they're very noisy, but that's the beautiful part about power mapping, is you get to figure out who really has the influence that you might need in order to get people on board with your vision for where you need to go.
I just want to add on that, like, when you include all of the stakeholders,
Sorry, I was talking.
I wasn't sure if I was talking.
Somebody came and told me my dinner was ready.
So at my school, we have this problem where there are like 2 people that make decisions for the whole school, but because they don't include input from all the stakeholders, they often do things that like they make decisions because they don't fully understand the whole situation. Like, for instance, they forgot to give recess to like middle school, or they'll like overbook things because they don't understand what's going on, or they don't know what middle school or elementary school needs, but they'll make decisions for them anyway. And then people will be like, you can't do that for these kids, So I feel like that's important in having all the stakeholders input too, just because you'll have that wealth of knowledge that you wouldn't get.
Is that 2 people at one school or 2 people in the whole district?
The school, we're a charter, so we kind of, it's gotten to be so they make all the decisions for everything, and we don't have any outside body kind of checking in on us. So things have gotten to be really weird.
These are really great points, and I appreciate the importance of certainly including all the appropriate stakeholders. And the key takeaway, I think, for me, from a lot of what you're saying is, the power of gaining buy-in and doing that through allowing the different stakeholders to share their perspective. It's shocking how much you learn when you give people a forum to share their experience, which might be very different from your own. It's sometimes not easy to hear what other people's experiences are, especially when they're very different from your own, or if their perspective is kind of in conflict with what you believe. But that's part of making decisions in ways that allow them to be functional, because if you have a portion of your population of your stakeholders that aren't on board with the decisions that are being made, it can be really difficult down the road. And fortunately, I think this conversation really leads nicely into our next one, which is getting into, I'm just going to shift this over here, our diversity, equity, and cultural competence. And when we talk about some of the bias that we have and what that looks like and what that, how that plays out for ourselves and also for this process that we're going to go through as teacher leaders in the program. So we have this cultural iceberg here. And so the iceberg image is pretty powerful and used in a variety of different ways. And in this case, it's specific to this cultural iceberg. So if you look at this image, you certainly, how many of you have seen it before? Any thumbs up if you've seen this particular one? Some have, it looks like some haven't.
I'm having a hard time getting back to the slides. Oh, hey.
Are you back with us?
No.
Is everybody else with us?
No, I don't have it. All I have is the video of just you and the Zoom chat.
Look for the little camera at the bottom of your screen. You may have to move your mouse around the bottom of the screen, and the camera should be down there in a little blue box.
Oh, wait.
Like camera in a little blue box.
Ah, it's not even little, it's huge.
Okay.
Yes, I haven't been on my Mac all day, so I forget how to use my Mac when I come home.
No
Well,
worries.
good. You always want to ask, don't suffer through saying, I can't.
I think overarching competency number 8 should be one of my goals.
That is technological facility.
Yes, I'm going to start a podcast as my capstone. No.
Oh, that was awesome. Thanks, Linda. I appreciate that.
Thanks for that.
So as you're looking at this cultural iceberg, take a minute to kind of look it over and kind of focus in on what's above the surface and then what's under the surface. And so I'd love us to have kind of a brief conversation. I want to keep us on track about what's kind of hiding underneath the surface of who we are, what's sort of not observable in this blue area, and what is observable. So go ahead, take a minute or two, and then it'd be great if everybody could either share out in the chat box, or we could hear from some new people also as well. If they could chime in, that would be great.
Karen, can you read what the arrows are? I think it's pretty hard for me to see. I think I see one is religion, history, the media.
Yep, I can read them. So are you able to see my cursor or no?
Yes, I can see your cursor, but some of the wording is in white. I don't know if anybody else is like me, but it's kind of hard to see.
Yep, I'll go ahead and share them. So this one is religion, and they're kind of like inputs. So we've got religion, we've got history, we've got the media, we've got educational systems, we've got family, and we have economics that are all being shown as sort of inputs into our interpretations and our core values. So thank you for pointing that out. If you ever notice anything is fuzzy or you can't see it, as Linda said, it's certainly not fair for anybody to kind of suffer through the conversation and what we're doing here if you can't access the technology. So did that help?
Yes, thank you.
When I look at the infographic here, it makes me think of like certain students that you meet for the first time, and you kind of get this idea of like who they are, like how they're presenting, but in reality, you know very, very little about them until you dig a little bit deeper.
Thanks, Stacey. I think you're right. It can be really easy to notice the observable things going on with kiddos, these behaviors and practices, which you can observe oftentimes visually, even verbally, however it may be, versus these kind of underlying things that we really don't always know about. We might not have any idea about any of, as Linda's phrased them, the institutions of influence. We might not really know what they are for certain students. And so how does this play out into how we communicate with people, how we view them, what sort of bias we might bring to our conversations with them if we don't understand all of this and only see the behaviors and practices that are observable?
Severina just made a really... What I see in this, it kind of looks like a tooth too, strangely enough to me. But the thing that strikes me is interesting is in our interpersonal relationships and dealings with people, and that when we have two groups of people that, let's say both groups have some different core values, that we tend to be more flexible and fluent in our communication with people that we share values with, that maybe we had that through shared history or family or religion. We came up in school together. But what everybody else sees that doesn't really understand that group of people is only the stuff that's on the surface. So to me, looking at this graphic of it is a really good representation about how we really do need to dig deep in and learn to be comfortable in communicating with different groups and not just staying with our comfort zone, if that makes sense. You know, I'm thinking maybe even a local organization. It might be a really strong school organization, but they're so deeply steeped in their own history and their own beliefs, and they're sunk way down low in their core values, and they're having a hard time, you know, kind of reaching out that to reach maybe the administrative team who's vice versa doing the same thing. They're stuck in their own thing, as opposed to everybody getting up on the surface and being able to actually communicate.
There's some really great things happening over here in the chat box. Severina made a really, and if I said that wrong, I am so very sorry. She made a really great observation that it's about building relationships, and then Mariah dug a little bit deeper and, you know, talked about how being, you know, this graphic reminds her about being a teacher in a new school, and how being new is really hard and you don't know what the political landscape is within a school is. So there's just some really great things being said over here in the chat box, and I'd love for y'all to get on here and, you know, explain more of what you're trying to talk about.
With that, is there a way, it came up earlier, somebody was asking if we could save the chat box. Is that something that we could post on Ed Communities possibly?
Yes, the chat box is going to be saved. So everything that we discuss will be available. So that's all saved and part of kind of the recording process of our Zoom. So yep, you can all access that. And I know some people were seeing some kind of interesting ideas, especially when we were talking a little bit earlier. So you'll have access to that. And so you don't need to necessarily jot it all down now. But it's great to go back to and reflect on and plan from. All right, so I'm going to keep us moving just for the sake of the time that we have left. We want to talk here a little bit more about what bias looks like. And so there's a really interesting conversation here about this binary approach to racism, and even maybe the bigger picture of bias as a conversation, and that, you know, there's sort of good and bad, and you're either one or you're the other, and there's no falling kind of on this spectrum of growth, but rather you sort of live in a way that is perceived as good or bad. So I like this quote over here. The good bad binary certainly obscures the structural nature of racism, makes it difficult for us to see or understand. Equally problematic is the impact of such a worldview on our actions. If, as a white person, I conceptualize racism as binary and place myself on the not racist side, what further action is required of me? No action was required because I'm not racist. And so that, I think, is a really powerful quote, because if you see yourself in this binary approach. You deem yourself as not racist, let's say, and because of that view, you kind of live completely off to one side of the spectrum. If you're not doing anything to be supportive, to improve yourself, to improve how you interact with others, to improve your approach to the world, what does that look like? Anybody have any thoughts on this binary kind of conversation that you're one or the other, and that you're really not able to kind of grow either way?
I think for most people, it's really hard for them to see themselves as racist because of this. But I think that part of it is that they don't understand that how it kind of like came about, more or less. So I'm thinking more along the line of institutional racism, and how we're part of the institution. And it's something that we have been, I can't think of the word, my brain's not functioning so well right now. Acclimatized, I'm not sure if that's it. But we've been more or less just kind of like born into the system, and it's been kind of drilled into us that, okay, well, if you say these things or do these things, then you're racist, and that makes you a bad person. But I think that we need to get past that and move into, okay, it's the systems that we're a part of, and if we're not making changes to those systems, then we're leaving a whole bunch of people out.
Stacey, I think that was a really profound way to conceptualize this conversation, and I'm really glad that you were brave enough to kind of share with us. You know, it can be hard, it can be challenging, it can be upsetting, it can be unsettling, especially when you approach racism, when you approach this conversation of race from a binary perspective. If you deem yourself on the other side, if you deem yourself as racist, I mean, that is a very challenging way to feel, I think, as opposed to if you see this sort of spectrum of a growth, this continuum of understanding and respect and support for some of these structures, Stacey, that you mentioned. I think that opens up the door for growth, instead of feeling like you're fixed in this place as a racist person and you don't have those growth opportunities. You know, last year, and the other coaches can probably speak to this too, the implicit bias tests are really hard. And people had a very hard time with some of the feedback that they were getting on those tests. And part of that is because some of these biases live below the surface. And so it can be hard to have them kind of rise up. And sort of what our job is to do when they do rise up is think about that continuum. You know, what steps can I make to move in the direction that I would like to on that continuum? You know, I'm not stuck on one side or the other, but I'm making progress. And I hope that kind of speaks to what you were saying, Stacey, about that you can progress, you can make change. You're not stuck on one side or the other. You find out kind of these areas that you can work on, and you work on them. You make change, you learn more. I don't know if anybody, we're going to go to this next one here and chat a little bit more about the implicit bias tests specifically. Did everybody complete those?
Karen, I'm just going to interrupt for a minute. This is Linda. Can you go back one? Can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
That slide is scrambled. I just want to let people know that. I think something happened when it was when it went from probably PowerPoint to Google, because racist bad is supposed to be on one side, not racist good. It's sort of that binary thing. But the way it looks now, I just wanted to draw attention to it. It will be correct in the deck when you see it, but it's incorrect there. So if it's just confusing anybody, I just wanted to draw attention to it. So not racist good, ignorant, bigoted, prejudiced, mean-spirited, all are over at the racist bad. It's that whole binary thing. All the other things are over on the other side. And old is sort of attached with racist, young with more progressive, southern with racist, northern with not. So it's that binary look. And I just wanted to draw attention that it was scrambled.
Honestly, Linda, there's something kind of powerful. For me, it was almost like interesting to hear us kind of go through it that way, you know, as they're kind of supposed to be compartmentalized. It probably adds even more understanding to the fact that how kind of weird it is to split things and have them be binary. So maybe it's a serendipitous way to have that slide be mixed up, because how kind of strange. And there is also an incredible amount of bias like embedded into how those are structured to a certain extent.
Yes, and I think that is part of the point, that that binary is always sort of getting to stereotypes, and it gets back to the danger of a single story.
Exactly. Well said. Thanks, Linda.
Okay.
And so did everybody have an opportunity to complete the implicit bias tests? If you just give me a thumbs up, then I know that, or a head nod, then I know that we're all there. Awesome. So we're going to kind of quickly go through some of these questions here, just to see kind of some of the feelings that we had. So feel free to chime in if there's something that you learned or that surprised you. I think even the third question, what confused you or made you feel disturbed? Does anybody want to speak to kind of any of those first three questions, which I think are kind of combined with one another?
Yeah, I would be interested in speaking. I took a few different ones, and most of them I got no bias on, but the one where I was noted a really strong bias was against the president. And I thought it was interesting because, yes, I may think that I may come with the assumption that everything that the president says is negative, but I don't feel too bad about that, to be honest. And maybe that's kind of a closed-minded approach, that I assume everything will be contrary to my beliefs, but at the same time, it's I don't know, in the way in which people are racist or sexist or discriminatory, and that is a simplified way of viewing the world. It's almost as if I've embraced the simplified way of viewing the world in as far as making negative assumptions about the actions of the president. So, yeah.
Thank you, Robert, for being, as I've said before, kind of brave and honest and sharing that with us. And yeah, it's always interesting to find things that, you know, there's bias that I think sometimes is obvious to us, and then others that might not be. Did anybody else have something that they found kind of confused them or disturbed them or surprised them as they were going through some of these tests that they didn't maybe necessarily realize was there?
I had an interesting outcome of one of them. I did 4 different ones, and then I had to make myself quit because I thought it was great fun. But I found it very interesting that I did the one with gay and straight, and that I had a slight bias for straight, which didn't really make a lot of sense to me because I'm gay. So I thought that was really interesting. It wasn't really disturbing, but it was just interesting. I would have expected to have a bias in the other direction, but I just thought that was interesting.
Thanks, Lisa, for sharing that. Yeah, it's the tests are interesting. They give sometimes surprising results based on kind of, I know that when I took them, I sort of went in expecting certain results, and then sometimes you don't get exactly what you thought you would. And I think sometimes it's okay to not agree with the results that you received. I know Linda and I can verify, we heard that a lot last year. And so it's not to say that they're 100% correct and that there's absolutely no room for error on these tests, but they're certainly nice in terms of our personal reflection and digging a little bit deeper into, you know, who we are and some of the things that we might not necessarily realize are there. I'm noticing something in the chat box that's always really interesting for me. Sarah, I hope you don't mind if I share it, about math and females in math. And so it's interesting to see, and I call it, kind of always classified myself as someone, a female who's not good at math. I taught history. I always did the I'm not good at math thing. And it's interesting to see, Sarah, I don't know if you want to chime in and respond with this association of males with math, which is
Sure.
can be pretty prominent in our culture, I think. And it's something that I've always been like, oh, I'm not good at math. I don't know if I necessarily associated my lack of math abilities with my gender per se, but I wonder if I was to take that particular bias test, I would see kind of some of my implicit bias about, oh, I'm a female, so that's part of why I'm not good.
Well, and I think for me, I see a lot of people mentioning that they were able to take the test again and, manipulate the results. And like, I'm a stats person. And so like, I definitely was thinking that as I was going through, I was like, can I get a different result? But that was one that really struck me because it was when I wasn't trying to mess with the test, before I started experimenting and exploring what I could do to it. And I, obviously it's not something I associate with something I believe consciously. And I think that, like Sabrina just mentioned in the chat box, it's that social conditioning. Even though we might consciously believe one thing, we associate certain terms and certain ideas with something else because that's what we see all the time. So it's just an interesting thing. And I think it's just that awareness is so important so that we don't fall unconsciously back into that social conditioning.
Thanks for that, Sarah. That was really great. And I also appreciate your honesty with your manipulation of the bias test. The second time around, it's always fun to kind of see how you can manipulate that reliability and validity of the testing structure. And as I was saying, it's certainly not a foolproof implicit bias test. I mean, no test necessarily is, but it's interesting to see. We didn't talk a lot about the last couple. If anyone wants to share anything about the connection of their results to the danger of a single story, and how implicit bias plays into that. And then even maybe some, where we expect to be now, and a year in the future, or even 5 years in the future, what does this look like? What sort of growth do we expect from ourselves over time? So if anyone wants to share kind of where they are now, and maybe even if you link this to kind of, the fact that you're involved in TLI means that you're to address kind of who you are as a leader, who you are as a teacher. And so what does some of this look like as you grow over time? I appreciate the chat box. I think we should all give Nancy a shout out as she does her countdown to retirement in 6 years. So I respect it, Nancy. Whoop, whoop. So that's awesome. And I'm sure in some ways those last 6 years are going to be really powerful. And the fact that you're here with us at a TLI is pretty exciting and wonderful way to kind of round out what I'm sure has been a wonderful career in education and on to even bigger and brighter things. So that's fantastic. I think we kind of have covered this pretty well. I know it's getting close to the end of our time together. So I just want to kind of quickly go through some of these assignments and then leave a little open-ended time in case anybody has any questions. So you have some post-workshop assignments. Upload to capstone folder. So completed phase 1, your needs assessment or assignment that we talked about. Based on need, identify the most likely allies and most likely opponents. This is a lot of that stakeholders conversation that we were having. So remember to think about who stakeholders are. I think we use them in pretty broad generic terms tonight. And I like that. I personally am drawn to that type of stakeholder definition. And it seems like based on the chat box, a lot of you were too. Strategies to grow your leadership skills into selected overarching competencies. So that's making sure that you use your books and start to hone in on where you're going to grow as a leader, and strategies of how to engage a diverse range of stakeholders and diverse perspectives in conducting a needs assessment. So again, think about who those stakeholders are, for you and what you're working on. And you know, make sure to be including the conversations when you do that, that we've had about implicit bias that you might have, or you know, you can anticipate others that you're working with might have.
Karen, I posted this 3 times in the chat box. Only look at the last one that I posted. Because I kept hitting the wrong URL. But there is a TED Talk by Verna Myers, How to Overcome Our Biases, Walk Boldly Towards Them. It's actually worth a watch. It's only 17 minutes. And the other that I posted is an article called The Paradox of Diversity in Social Change Organizations. Again, worth a read if you have time. When you start looking at biases and looking at our own biases. So I wanted to put those in as optional kind of resources for you.
That's fantastic, Linda. I think it's always great to have some supplemental materials. And as I used to tell my fellows as they were putting together their capstone, part of that process is the evidence that shows how you're growing as a leader. And so pulling in some of these additional resources can be a really great way to do that. And those of you that are TED Talk followers probably know that they're generally relatively quick, but usually very engaging and interesting. Linda, we don't need to actually do this slide. And do we need to do this one?
Karen, can you just go back one? No, we don't need. I just want to point out something. This assignment for fellows who can't attend an actual virtual meeting live, the way they're going to engage with the content is to do an assignment. This is not for you. Everybody on tonight, you're done. You're good. You've engaged with Module 3. You've engaged in the conversation. And this has been a fantastic group tonight. But some of our fellows, because of conflicts in schedule, and this may happen to you down the line for Module 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, for any time you miss when you can't actually engage in the content live, there would be, when you listen to the archived recording, there will be at the end a slide like this. It won't be this one, but a slide like this with a couple of questions related to the content that you'll engage in, and you simply write a one-page reflection, and then you'll submit it to your coach, who will give you some feedback on it and maybe ask you a few probing questions. But that's all it is. I just wanted to make sure that if you saw it, you would know what it is in the future, in case you are one of those people that have to go to an archived recording to engage in the content. I think whenever possible, it's much better to be involved at the live recording as they're happening. You get to ask questions, it's more engaging, and you don't have to do the written reflection at the end. So it saves you some time too. Thanks, Karen. I just wanted to mention that.
That was great, Linda. Thank you for providing that clarity. I saw it come up and I was like, I'm pretty sure this isn't for all of you that are here and have fulfilled your need to attend the Zoom, which is, as Linda said, great. I think, you know, as I was, you know, when I was a fellow, I really tried to consistently be there for the Zooms because I knew that I had fulfilled the expectations. And as Linda said, you're almost kind of creating more work for yourself in a way if you need to watch and then complete the written assignment. So thank you all so much for being with us and putting in the time kind of in person. And that's also too a really, you know, as we were talking about at the beginning, us bringing together our shared experiences and perspectives and creativity and plans and honesty in our sharing is part of what TLI is about. So the more that you do that with the other fellows, the more that I think you get out of the process. My cohort had some fellows from my actual district last year, and when I would get together with them, they said one of their favorite things was learning about how incredibly unique other teachers' experiences were across the country compared to their own. So the more we get into the program, the more you'll get of that. And so the last thing that you have here, just to make sure we've kind of gone over it so you know what's coming, is the Module 3 pre-work. So similar to this module, you'll register for a workshop, select one early step from your capstone, and design an activity that will help demonstrate your growth in your 2 overarching competencies. You'll need to review pages 13 through 16 of the needs assessment document and select one of the 3 readings to support your learning. And so you can find more information specifically in your Module 3 due document than what's shared here. with the links and all the additional information that you'll need, but this just gives you kind of an overview of what you need to do.
And to emphasize what Karen's saying, it's only one of the 3 readings. I mean, you're welcome to read all 3 of them, but you only are required to read one of the 3 readings. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, Karen, I think that all registration, that you may have already, all of you may have already registered for Module 3. But if you haven't, I think the registration is on the LMS at the end of Module 1. I think that's where all of the signups are. I think they're in Module 1. So you may, if you haven't, you may have to go back to Module 1 and click on it. And under assignments, it says register for all the different modules. So that's just an aside. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Perfect. I really love how the sign-up sheet is structured this year. I think it's easy to hop in and sign up for, so that that worked out great. I think that's what we have in terms of slides, Linda. I think
I think you're right. Just one other thing. If you sign up, because this has come up a couple of times, if you sign up for, let's say, Module 3 on Sunday night at 7 p.m., and it turns out now you have a birthday party you have to go to that night, and you need to change it. You can't change it yourself. Just notify your coach, and your coach will notify either me or your site coordinator. We can change it at NEA, and then you can sign up for another one. And in fact, if you can't attend the one you signed up for, go and sign up for another one in that same module, and get into that group, and then just let your coach know that you're dropping out of the Sunday night at 7 and you're going into the Monday night at 7. But that's the way you'll have to change it. We haven't figured out, Karen, as much as we like the form, we haven't figured out a way to let the fellows change it themselves. So if you've signed up, you can change if you absolutely have to. Just notify your coach and sign up for another module.
Okay, I didn't notify my coach. I just signed up for another module. So I will let her know.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Teresa just posted one last call for attendance. Please, please, please make sure that you utilize that attendance form. We put that in place this year to make it as simple as possible for you to pop in, input your info, and that way we have a nice time-stamped recording of the fact that you were here, which, as Linda said, prevents you from having to do the written work that goes along with watching the recording. So make sure that you earn for spending the last hour and a half with us. And I know that I'm super grateful that you were here. I know we had a decent sized group. It looked like we had a really active chat box and a number of people that participated. So I certainly appreciate that. And you, for those of you that are East Coasters, staying up late with us, and for the rest of you, hopefully you have a little time to relax before you head to bed. But thanks so much. Feel free to reach out to your coaches if you have any questions. And I think that's all. Linda, I don't know if you have anything else that we need to add, but that was certainly great.
No, I don't think so. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, coaches. I really appreciate you all being here. And thank you, fellows. This was a fantastic conversation, both out loud and within the chat box. And I'll look forward to having a copy of the chat afterwards as well.
I had one question in the chat box about attendance. If they are on their cell phones, they can't click on the link, how would they submit their attendance?
Good question. I don't have an answer for you. I wish I did.
I just for the sake of how late it is, Linda, maybe, oh, someone's saying they submitted from their
Oh, okay, there you go.
So, but if not, if there's someone that's having, oh, Heather. Oh, okay. Nancy's got you.
Okay.
So
Okay.
anybody else have any challenges on their phone? Make sure if you are, just submit it. Okay. Shauna's okay. All right.
And it's another reason we ask you in the chat box to put your name and your state. So if for some reason there's a glitch, we know you've been here, you've been engaging in the chat box, so we can transfer it.
Perfect. All righty. That sounds good. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Have a great evening, everybody.
Good night.
And we're ending 2 minutes early. Woohoo!
Woohoo.
Karen, can you stay on for a couple of minutes?
I can.
Okay.
Do you need any of the rest of us to stay on as coaches?
Not unless you need to stay on or you have any questions, but other than that. No, everybody, it's late. I'm only going to talk to Karen for a couple of minutes.
Awesome. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Hey, real quick, this is Nancy in Arizona. I couldn't get Heather registered in.
I think I figured it out.
Okay.
I don't know if you can hear me. I unfortunately was in urgent care with my daughter for most of the meeting, so that's why no one could see me. So I got home and she was really sick, so I did it from my phone in urgent care.
I'm sorry to hear that. I hope she's okay.
Yeah, we got home and she's taking a shower now, so we're all good. I got her antibiotics. So
Good.
Heather, if you don't show up, I'll make sure you get registered.
yeah, I think I was able to do it. I literally grabbed another phone because she's in the shower, so I used her phone and logged in on 2 devices. So hopefully that didn't screw it all up.
No, I'm sure it's fine.
Well, thank you very much. It was, I mean, I know I couldn't say much, but I really was into it. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
Okay. Talk to you later, Nancy.
Okay. Karen, what happened? Did you have trouble getting in?
It doesn't.
Is the problem ours? I mean, is it something with the NEA license?
So the instructions had you go to Zoom and log in under the NEA account and then start your session, but it doesn't actually roll it over. And I use Zoom all the time, which shouldn't really require you to like do any additional downloading or any of that. And it did not roll over. It did not click over. Like it just it just never got there. And I had no problem coming in as like a participant.
Okay,
so
that happened to me Monday night.
Yeah.
I had the same exact thing. I didn't get on until 7:08 and everybody was having the same problem.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find out if you were having the same problem as well. Oh, I love your dog. If you were having the same problem as well. So I think the way I went in tonight, Anna has listed, if you go to the Zoom link, you have the password, you have the, you sign into Zoom US and it tells you to sign in. So you'll sign in as, see you later, Louise. You'll sign in as ECLL, whatever it is, 36, whatever that is.
Yep.
And then you have the password, which is leader 2019, I think.
Yep.
And then when you get to the page, if you click on meetings,
yep,
the meetings are listed. That's the way I got in tonight.
That's how I tried to get in.
I clicked on meetings and it said join or exit. I joined. Is that how you got in tonight?
That's exactly how I tried to get in. I tried to join and it did not allow me to join.
Oh, okay. Because it did let me do it tonight, but it didn't let me do it Monday night.
I wonder if you got in before me.
I think Anna was in, somebody was in before I was, because when I got on, the first time I got in, there was nobody there.
Okay.
And I said, oh no, this is a repeat of Monday night. Oh my God, this is the same thing that happened Monday night. So I got nervous when I finally got in and didn't see you. I thought, oh my goodness, you must be having the same problem I had the other night. And I can't remember who else Sarah was on when I got in. So Sarah would have had no, she wouldn't have had the facilitator's code. So,
I know, that's what I don't.
Anna might have gotten in first, but I was able to get in after whoever got in, and I just hit join. Sometimes it says start the meeting, but it looked like somebody had already started the meeting.
Okay.
And the other night, poor Becky.
I heard.
The poor thing. I felt she was really good. She did not act flustered. I would have been a wreck. She did not act flustered. And what happened is, so when she would go in, we would all get kicked out.
Yeah.
And then we'd get back in, and then she'd see nobody was in the room, so she'd shut it down again, and then we would get kicked out again.
Oh,
so finally, through trial and error, she figured it out. But I did tell Anna about it, so I don't know that Anna had gone over it with people. But I wanted to make sure you weren't. By the way, you did a great job tonight. You are really a natural at this. You did an absolute phenomenal job. So I really appreciate the job you did, and I loved that the coaches supported the work by jumping in when they had. I thought tonight went really well.
They were great. You were great. Thank you. I feel like I was, you're always a little frazzled when things don't run as smoothly as
well, especially at the beginning when it doesn't start out right.
Yeah.
So When is your next one?
My next one is Thursday because Anna asked me if I could cover one.
Oh yes, we are going to pay you for that, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes, you're filling in because we had a fourth facilitator, and Anna may have told you this, who then had to drop out because she became an administrator.
That's what she said.
And then we found somebody else through Jennifer Barnett who had helped develop the social justice work and is phenomenal. Has done work with the Southern Poverty Law Center, but had been teaching in Alabama. And Jennifer, I guess, didn't realize that she had moved to Florida and was now teaching in a parochial school. So she couldn't be a member. She was willing to join as a community ally, but we can't have her do the work as a community ally. She's got to be an actual member. And I even tried to reach out and say, you know, do you teach at a community college? Because you can join as adjunct faculty. And she hadn't. She has done it back in Alabama, but she hadn't done it there. So then we were like, oh my goodness, we were really scrambling. And I did suggest when Anna said, she's Linda, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I said, hey, try Karen and Becky and see whether one of them can. And she was so relieved when you were able to take steps.
Yeah, no worries.
So is this the second one you're doing then?
This is my first one, and then I have 2 on Thursday.
Oh, okay, that's it. Okay.
I think I'm back on Thursday, right? I've got to look, but I think they're back.
Yeah, there are 2 on Thursday, 7 and 9. Yeah, and I think Adrian may be on with you Thursday. I don't know. I'll check. But anyway, I hope you're able to get. What time did you start to try to get in?
I started about 10 minutes before 9, and it just kept rolling.
Yeah, you might want to try to get on like at 8:30.
Okay.
And just get on, and then have the room open, and then just have turn off your camera, and you can go about your business. But you'll know you're in, and that other people can get in, and then you don't have to worry about it.
And I wonder if that's part of it. I end up sort of like if somebody got in first via almost the host, and then it doesn't like another person coming on board, and so it doesn't let you sort of sneak in.
Right. There's something about if somebody goes in as the host first, there's a problem. And I know I just joined. I wasn't in as the host.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether Sarah might have been, but she wouldn't have a way of getting in. I think it had to be Anna, but I don't know. But anyway, but try getting in. Sometimes if you go in like at 8:30, you just set yourself up and get in. And I'll check with Anna and see. Normally it has in the meeting room, in the set of meetings, it says start. It doesn't say join. It says start. I don't know that she has it set in a particular way.
Yeah.
To allow you and the coaches to all join so that you can all have host permissions.
It's almost like you need to have the ability to have multiple hosts on the session. Yeah. And that way, as we all get in, we have those kind of hosting capabilities, but we don't lock each other out.
And I don't know also whether, I hope she has, whether she's enabled that anybody can get into the room without the host. Like you can get in, people can get in and wait.
Yeah, it's always nice if someone can. I always set my Zooms that way because it takes some level of pressure off you too as the host to have people kind of get in, hang out. Some people like to get there pretty early. And
they do, and they like to just make sure they're on, and then they go and get themselves organized. And anyway, I won't keep you, but you did a phenomenal job.
Thank you. You were great. I love that you were willing to chime in. I hope it's okay that when things came up that I was kind of like, it makes sense to sort of kick it to Linda.
No, that's fine.
Knowledge, so that was great.
The problem we have this year is we don't have enough staff to cover all the meetings. I'm covering 3. Adrian's covering 2. Rowena's covering 2. That leaves 1 not covered. And it may be one of yours. If I can do it, I will also try to do it. But right now, I was covering the first 3, and then Adrian covered the earlier one tonight, but I'll look and see which one is still empty, and if I can cover it, I'll try to do it as well. I think it's good if you have a staff person on, but it's not that you need us, but it's good in case you come across questions. And, and clearly you didn't know that slide was just added yesterday, the assignment slide for the archived one, because we don't know which one is exactly going to. That's why I wanted to say, you guys are good to go. You don't have to do anything else. You're fine.
What I really like, even if it was really nice, so this was my first session, so you being on this time to provide some of that background knowledge was particularly meaningful. So even if there's always someone from staff that's on within our first session, like the next 2, I'm going to be able to say what you said. because now I know. So now it's going to be easy on the second and third time, no problem. But that first time to kind of have that staff support would be meaningful if you were kind of structuring which sessions might not be covered, structure the earlier ones, and then I think we're fine.
Yeah, I was doing the first three is what I said. I was doing the first 3 nights is what I had decided to do. But also, you have the added advantage of having been an alum and a coach and now a facilitator. So, you know, you've got like the the triple play here, so we're good.
It definitely helps. I think it's nice to kind of add in, and I try to be honest, you know, this stuff was hard last year. People struggled with the implicit bias. Like, I don't want them to feel guilt. You know, I remember last year you probably were on some where people got grumpy. You know, I want them to know it's okay to not feel great about it. But what you can't do is stay there. You need to move forward. So I was happy that they were sort of receptive to that conversation.
Well, I was as well. And what I did like is how thoughtful they were in thinking about challenges in their schools. So they were already sort of thinking about that. But I also like that people were really willing to share and speak. Becky did not have a group like that. I had a group like that last night with Darlene filled in last night, and you're filling in on Thursday night for the empty slot. And you had a good group tonight. Becky had a smaller group, and they were more reluctant to pick up the mic. So in that already makes it harder. So she did a great job, but it was hard for her because, you know, first of all, the technology glitch, but
and
also
the awkward silences are never easy.
The group was a little shy. She had a few great people, but the group was a little shy. Okay, I won't hold you up. I just wanted to figure out what was going on and whether I could be helpful in making sure you can get on the next time without a problem. But it sounds like exactly what you said.
Thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of the night. We'll talk soon.
Have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.